G'day everyone, for our normal lively broadcast. I'm going to put the air conditioner on because it's a little bit hot. Hang on a second. So let's see who we've got here. I've got SRM Media's here, Richard's here. Hi Richard, how are you? Now I'm going to pull these headphones out because they're annoying me. Richard's here, so I'm waiting on a few coming on. Now already there's a stack on already, so please give us a thumbs up if you actually are here, because I'd love you all to say hi. Now I'm just trying to work out how I can unplug these. Oh, I have to pull the microphones out, I think. I've got stacks of stuff to talk to you today, guys. Some really interesting rumours and stuff like that. So we're going to have a lot of fun. So we've got Gerald here, Joe's here as well. I'm just going to have a beer now. The beer I'm sharing today is, what is it? It's White Rabbit, which I think is from Geelong, which is local to us down here, I think. It's a very dark beer. How was it anyway? Was it all right?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah, that's good. Now, if you wonder who is at the back over here has replaced Susie, I think Susie might be having an affair. We've got Ben at the back. You'll often see Ben in the chat, guys. Ben's come down today to actually see me, and he's popped in for a drink. Pop over, Ben. Come and say hi.
Hey, everyone.
Let me just move this over so you can see good old Ben. Yeah, there's Ben there saying hi to everyone. So say hi to Ben, everyone. He's a local photographer as well. Ben often assists me in the weddings that I do as well. Unfortunately, though, for Ben, he is a Nikon shooter. So we do have to forgive him for that. Move forward a little bit. Can we see you? You have to come close to me, Ben. So what cameras are you using, Ben?
At the moment, I've got an 810.
Yep.
D810, and my backups are a D7100 and a D7200.
Yeah, and you're very happy with the Nikon, aren't you? So
Yeah. To be honest, if I was starting again, I'd probably go Sony, but I'm just quite invested in Nikon glass. But yeah, if it was all back to square one, I'd definitely be looking at going Sony. But yeah, I'm just not at a point, obviously like yourself, where I'm consistently shooting weddings every weekend or working every week, so I'm not at a point where I can actually sort of throw all that away and start again.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Like if you know, the thing is, if you have a lot of glass, it's actually tough to sell up. I mean, I did do that, but when I did that, I already had a hell of a lot of work, and I could justify doing it. Like I said, you have to be able to justify selling all your gear and starting from scratch, you know, and that's exactly the thing that you got to say. Greg there has said Ben's forgiven.
Thanks, Gerald.
I love it.
Thanks, mate.
And like I said to you all before, I had no issues when I was shooting Nikon at all. The Nikon stuff was great. It's just that for me, as I was getting older, it was starting to hurt my back, and I was getting more into video. So that's the reason that I moved over. You know, and that's the main thing for me. And I mean, like I said, Ben has now recently got the D810, and that's an amazing camera. That's what I had, actually. I had the D810, and I love that camera. And that was the beauty of coming from Nikon to Sony, was the results basically are the same, because the sensors basically give you the same, you know, recovery. You got the same, you can pull the shadows up the same way. It's always Canon that has been a little bit behind in that respect. So yeah, it's interesting that Ben was the, you know, the Nikon shooter. And even when we're shooting weddings together, his files are matching mine because the systems are so close in how they look. So it doesn't really matter. Whereas if you're shooting Canon, the look would definitely look, you know, it would look different. So, you know, that's an interesting thing as well.
Definitely. Yeah.
So Ben's just bought my drone. He's taken my old Phantom 4 off me today, so he's going to be out playing with that as well. Yeah, he's doing a lot of real estate type work at the moment, and they're going to be using that a lot with things like sliders and drone shots of all the properties and things like that as well. So, you know, it's going to be interesting. Yeah. But I am probably going to interview Ben one day as well, and we'll talk about how it is for an up-and-coming photographer, and I thought you might find that really interesting if I actually do that with another photographer who's just starting out, and I can talk about the things, you know, how hard it is to start up in this business and things like that. So we might do that.
Trying to build work.
As well. So, you know, it'll be an interesting thing together. So, yeah, Ben's also sharing the White Rabbit with me.
Cheers, mate.
We're obviously working very, very hard. Casper said Sony drinking game. I love it.
Now that the power's back on, it's easy.
Yeah, I came on a bit later because the power only came on with 15 minutes to go. I didn't think I was actually going to get the live on today, so it worked out fantastic. So, yeah, I'm going to pull back to me anyway.
Yep.
So you've met Ben anyway, and like I said, we will be doing some more together over the in the future, so you'll see that a lot. Ben's going to stay a while. He might just nick off in a little bit because he's heading out, probably to fly his drone, actually. Now, let's just pull up the chat because I just want to say hi to the people that are here. So we've got SRM Media, Richard's here, Mick is here, Gerald's here, Joe, Paul, Alan, Mike, Happy, hi Happy a7iii photographer. Mike said, how you doing? Harold said, the happy photographer. Mike said hi. Anu said hello as well. Keith's here. Ariel, Andy, Mick. Gerald's obviously here. Melvin's also here. We've got Stacks, Richard, Ariel, etc., etc. Casper's also here. So if you do have any questions, guys, please leave that at David Osler because I would love you to... that'll get me so I can get the attention of what I've got to come back and answer a little bit later on. But I have got actually stacks to discuss with you through the rumours and things like that. We've got the Panda photography here as well. So we've got stacks and stacks here today. Now, the interesting thing is I did have a guy the other day talking about the last live show that I did going through all the rumours and stuff. And he basically said, you were just going over the Sony Alpha rumour site. And I said, yes, that's correct. But I'm expanding that with my live audience here where we can discuss the things that are actually announced. And I basically said to him, you know, if you don't want to watch, just don't watch. It's funny how people start to criticise what you're doing, and instead of just turning off and not worrying about it, it's just amazing. This does go through all these rumours that are actually there, and we're just going to expand basically as a group what, you know, is actually happening there. So Ben's also just put hi mate on the chat as well. And it's funny because he's sitting right next to me. So what I'm going to talk about today too is the overheating. We're going to start with that first, but I'll just bring up the camera, which is over here. So yes, so I've only, basically, look, I only unboxed it yesterday just before I did the actual test. So I thought what I'd do, because it was 30 degrees yesterday, it was really hot actually, and if I had a couple of other cameras that were just sitting outside and they were really hot to even just touch. And it was incredibly, like I said, it was 30 degrees, but it was also very humid yesterday, and it was really a very sticky day. So that was more like a torture test that I did give the camera yesterday. If you go back to my previous video, you'll see that discussion that we had there as well. But in the end, though, basically, this shut down around about 26 minutes in that heat, and I was shooting 4K. I can't remember. Just let me check what the megabits were on this camera. Because I'm just curious to see. Yes, it was 25p 100 megabits per second. So it was at its highest settings for 4K. Am I worried about that turning off after that period of time? No, I'm not, for the way that I shoot. And I was talking to Ben about it earlier. I just actually sold my GH5 before I came on live, actually. Someone just purchased it. If I am shooting something that is longer than that, I will always be shooting things like wedding, the actual ceremony and things like that with 1080p. There's no reason for me to be shooting at 4K because the file sizes are massive. I also have to try and manipulate that later on the computer, and it slows everything down, and then I have to store them on hard drives and everything else, and it's just massive. So I'm not interested in shooting things like wedding ceremonies in 4K. So the most that I'm actually shooting for 4K is only 5 to 10 seconds. Often it's only 2 seconds. The average for me is 5 seconds. That's the average shoot that I will do, and I'm not going to have any issue with that camera overheating at all for that period of time. So it really doesn't matter, but I just wanted to show you the torture test of what that camera could do. And that it will shut down. And I know someone like the angry photographer is now probably going to see that and go, Sony, blah, 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 blah. But the whole thing is, for the time that gave me, I'm actually quite happy with that. If you did want longer than that and you want to shoot 4K, I think the a7R3, I've heard that doesn't overheat, but my A9 did still overheat, and that surprised me too. But you would really be needing to shoot with something like the GH5 if you definitely want to not have anything that overheats if you're shooting for 4K for a period of time, like, you know, over half an hour in really hot weather. And to be honest, if I was shooting that and I had to shoot in 4K, I would just put it in somewhere where there was shade. If there was no shade available, I would use something like an umbrella or whatever. The direct heat yesterday, I believe, was the problem. So I just wanted to sort of clear that up with all of you. Certainly do not put buying off the camera because that camera heated after 25 minutes. I had no issue with that at all, and for what I shoot, it was fine. But like I said, we'll go through that a little bit later. So let's anyway go through some of the live discussions, because I'd love to see what you guys think about some of these rumours. And I will come back to the questions a little bit later, guys. So let's move over, and I'm going to go here. This is what to expect from Sony over the next few months, I believe. It's saying basically in here that they're expecting the next thing is going to be the a7S III, so that's obviously going to come out soon. But I did notice that when they were talking about this, Sony Alpha Rumours said that they didn't have anything stated at this stage to say that there was a camera number that was leaked. So it looks like it's definitely not going to be announced at NAB. And I think it's going to be Photokina, which is in September. It'll probably come out there. And then it may only be announced there and it'll be released a month or so later. So, you know, that's something that probably will come out later this year or early next year, I would say. They are going to have to, for instance, because the a7S III is directly related to video, that's where it's more concentrated on, and it probably will be shooting 4K 60p. They may then try and sort the overheating out with that camera to make sure that that doesn't overheat. So whether that's a different processor body or whatever, they probably are going to have to try and solve that, because remember, 4K 60p has a lot more data than what I was trying to shoot yesterday. So that is something that they're going to probably have to try and get around. But again, if that camera worked for me for the same time my a7 III did for that 25-30 minutes, I'd be happy. But yeah, anyway, they're saying there's nothing released yet. A couple of other things, though, about that were interesting, though. They are saying that they believe that another a777 III is going to be announced. So that's the A mount. And that probably, I've got a feeling that will be the last one if that's the case. But I could be wrong, but I just think that's probably the case of what it will be. And they're saying that could be announced sometime around about May. The other thing, too, down there is they're saying that the Sony a6-700, I should have more information about that soon. I would also love to have that camera. And it's one that I'm hanging out for. Hopefully it'll have a flip-out screen and 4K 60p. So that's what I'm hoping that brings up. So if it does, I'd probably buy that in a heartbeat, because I still love my a6-500 because it's very small, and I love that on a gimbal and things like that. So there is still a market for that. At the moment, though, I probably would not be buying an a6-500. I'd be moving up to the a7 III. There's not that much difference in price to justify the a6-500 at the moment. If the a6-700 has that flip-out screen and the 4K 60p, then you could say, yes, I'm going to buy it. But apart from that, you'd have to think, well, I'd probably get the a7 III at the moment. And I've noticed a lot of people are selling the a6-500s. There's a lot of them out there, and a6-300s. So you'd have to make a decision if you want to go down that avenue or not. Another thing that I've noticed here in the rumours is the Sony 24mm GM. Let me know in the comment box if that interests you. Doesn't interest me much because I like the 35mm focal length. And if I bought a prime lens wider than that, I'd want to go very wide, you know, like something like 12mm or 9mm, something like that. So the 24 doesn't interest me. The only way it would interest me, I suppose, is if you're going to shoot in 35mm crop mode, because then it becomes a 35 roughly. So that could be interesting. But yeah, it's probably not one that interests me. But let me know if you're interested in that. There's also a Sony 200-600 that's rumoured. This lens is in development and should be announced sometime after the 400 2.8's released. So again, that's going to be for all you sport shooters, landscape, wildlife shooters, things like that. If you're into birding, stuff like that, 200-600 would be a great lens. I quite would like the 100-400. I mean, the 400mm 2.8 is way too big for what I'd be lugging around, and I couldn't afford it anyway. But that's for a specific marketplace. Another one there too they're saying is the Sony 135 FE. This lens is on the Sony roadmap too. Have you ever used a 135?
135?
Yeah.
No.
It is the most beautiful. I was just asking Ben if he's used the 135. I have used them before, and it's the most gorgeous focal length for portraits. It is stunning, and if you could get that at 1.8, and they're saying that the Sony 35, they're not giving information about that yet, but if the Sigma is 1.8, you can probably bet that the Sony is probably also going to be 1.8. 1.4 probably would be too big, but I'm guessing it'll be 1.8. Remember too that the Batis also has a 135, but that's an f2.8. So personally, I'd prefer to buy the Sigma or the Sony one if that comes out. But it is the most gorgeous focal length for portraits, so that's rumoured anyway. And the last thing they're saying is a possible surprise is that a medium format camera is still rumoured. That certainly doesn't interest me. I've shot medium format before when I used to shoot fashion. And it's very slow and meticulous in the way that you shoot, and it's certainly not a camera that I would be buying. And also a RX100 release in June. So there's a couple of things there that are on the roadmap about what's going to happen in the coming weeks. So yeah. Next news story is this. And this was interesting because Edelkrone put out an announcement where they were saying that the A7S Mark III has been said there. And it's saying maybe Edelkrone knows something about the A7S III, or more likely they are just guessing the A7S III is coming soon. Anyway, they just added the A7S III option on their motion kit. Now, I don't know how they can do that. Perhaps it's a mistake. But that's a really interesting rumour that's sort of just been found out, which came out. And again, pop in the chat, guys, and I'll talk about that when we come back a little bit later. Next one, I've just got to download these again now because the internet went off when I was out of power just before. There is now a walkthrough for the A7R3 and A7 III menus. So you can now download that and have a look at that and take a walkthrough. I will be doing this a little bit later on myself, and I'll show you how I've set my camera up. Because I basically, where are we? I want to go through with you how I set up all the custom buttons on this, and how I set up the back and the FN menu and all other things that come through here. So I'm going to do a setup with this once I set this. I haven't done it yet because basically I only did the heat test yesterday and haven't used it apart from that. But I'll show you how I completely set this up as a menu for me personally, and then I'll share that with you, and that might add a bit that we can discuss as well. But in the meantime, you can look at that site here, and I'll put these links down below, so you can go through these if you did want to go through the menu settings as well, because that's meant to be a complete menu walkthrough. The angry photographer certainly won't like this page that I'm just about to bring up. Because it was Max Youyev. Have you ever watched Max Youyev? Yep. Max Youyev has just brought out a video that compares the x-H1 versus the a7 III, and he said basically the Fuji gets destroyed. You can watch this video. He tests them side by side and shows the ISO performance of each camera. He ended up by saying at the end that it was at a two-stop advantage to the Sony, and that's the difference. Now, there's something I want to say to you here is that the Fuji, in no way am I bagging that camera, because that camera actually is excellent and it's fantastic if that's the system that you want to go down. But APS-C is never going to match full frame if you're dealing with low light particularly and depth of field. It's never going to look exactly the same as if you're using full frame. I use my A6500 all the time, and I love the results that gives me. Even the GH5, that shoot that I put up, those results look beautiful. But you're still going to get a different look if you use the A9, the full frame. Now, for instance, if I go into dark reception halls in weddings and things like that, I would immediately stop using my A6500 or the GH5, and I'd start to use the Sony. And you'll have the same problem if you're dealing with Fuji as well. You're definitely going to have issues with noise in that camera. And Max shows that there's a two-stop advantage with using the Sony a7 III. So it is something that you have to consider if you want to go down that line. Like I say, am I saying you have to get rid of Fuji and go to Sony? No, but it will have an impact if you want to shoot under low light conditions. If you're not doing that type of shoot, well, then the Fuji system obviously is very adequate for what it gives you. But being a wedding and portrait photographer like I do, I love that full frame look, and I also love the ability to shoot in low light if I need to. So that's a benefit for me. So anyway, I just thought I'd mention that, and like I said, I'll leave that in the description down below. You can have a look at that and see what you think. Obviously, the angry photographer would disagree with that, but it's just the truth. And the problem with Fuji is, and I hope I don't upset any Fujis that are watching, but I think they lie in what they count as being their ISO. It's not true readings that they actually use for their ISO readings, and that's the problem. And if you watch Max's video, you'll understand what I'm saying. The difference is incredible when you're dealing with the differences in ISO. I think they're trying to cheat a little bit in what they're saying the ISO actually is on their cameras. But anyway, let me know in the description or the comments down below what you think about that. But you definitely will be better off if you're in low light or you want that beautiful depth of field with full frame cameras. If you are dealing with like doing birding or whatever, well, the Fujifilm can be an advantage because you have that crop factor which is involved. And that is much better to be shooting with something like that rather than doing cropping in your camera or cropping later on. So there is sometimes advantages to using these smaller format cameras, even like the A7, A6-700 or A6-500, I mean, or even the Nikon, what have you got? The
7200.
Yeah, the 7200 that Ben's got. So there are advantages sometimes that it does give you that extra reach.
Or the D500.
Yeah, the D500, yeah, D500's a perfect one. So that's something to consider anyway. But have a look at that and let me know in the comments what you think about that, guys, because I'd love to know. As this downs, I'm just going to have a beer. Cheers. Cheers, man. This would be a nice lens I wouldn't mind to have a look at. It's the Laowa, I think it's pronounced. Is that how you pronounce it? I think it is. Laowa 2.8 is available from BH Photo and Adorama now. It's $4.99. So really nice lens, and it's got a decent f-stop number. Be a great video lens, I would say, because the manual focusing on this lens would be stunning. Let me just bring it up and show you. This is it here. Yeah, it'd be lovely. So you can sort of see as I scroll down, the beautiful focal lens. These wouldn't be fly-by-wire, so they will be a true manual focus. So it would be good if you were doing racking focusing and stuff like that. Would be much smoother, similar to using Voigtlander lenses, things like that. So that's a lens now that you can get for $4.99. Next, rumour 2 Tamron. This was quite interesting because they were interviewed by DP Review, and if you look at what they're saying down here, is that it took a year to develop that lens. So when you say it took them 12 months to develop that, the 28 to 70, 28 to 75 millimeter lens. It took 12 months to develop that lens, and it also says due to the compact size of these lenses, that they basically developed this lens completely for the Sony system, which is what Sigma haven't done yet. Remember, they've basically welded on, even though they're meant to work much, much better in focusing than the adapter that you use, the MC11. The Tamron lenses have been designed to work specifically on the Sony mount, the same as the Samyang lenses have as well. So they are designing a little bit different, and you probably find that Sigma will do this eventually as well down the track. But if you look at it too, he's also said that these lenses, they've used the autofocus is much better because they've actually used a stepping motor for the autofocus, so it won't be noisy, I believe. Some of the problems with some of the other lenses that are out there at the moment, they can be noisy for video, and you can hear the focusing move back and forth. So that's something, for stills obviously it doesn't make any difference at all. But if you are dealing with video, you don't want to hear that lens hunting back and forth if you're using autofocus. So it's something you've got to consider if you're going down that avenue. Will it be quiet? And what they're saying here, if you look at the comment, is actually saying that the autofocus motors are very good for video. This lens has a stepping motor for autofocus, which is better for video. And the last thing down here, they're saying that due to the size, though, they've had to use polycarbonate material. So it's not all metal like what the Sigmas and that are. So they've had to basically use polycarbonates instead of that. So it has affected that because they wanted to keep it small and light, I suppose, without it being too big. Anyway, so that's something that you can look at. I'm interested to see how this lens is later on. It's definitely not a lens that I will buy, though, because like I said to you before, I don't like using the 24-70 focal length. I prefer to use primes. You got a 24-70, have you? Do you use that all the time for your weddings?
Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
Sharp,
So yeah.
Sharpest lens I own,
Yeah, so see, Ben loves his 24-70 for Nikon. That's the Nikon lens, isn't it? Yep.
Yeah.
It's a 2.8 version he's got, which is the same lens I actually had probably when I was shooting the D4, the D4S. And it is a great lens that a lot of wedding photographers will have, which is a 24-70 and 70-200. I've moved away from using those big lenses, though, and now, like I said, I'm just using a 35 prime and a 85 prime, and I'm happy with that focal length. And then occasionally I'll get out the 70-200, but that's the way I shoot. Clearly Ben doesn't want to go down that avenue yet, and he's quite happy, and he said it's the sharpest lens he's got. So, it just depends on how you shoot, guys, yeah. Yeah, also Ben's a lot younger, and he probably doesn't get the aching back. Do you get an aching back after a day of shooting? No, see, he's a lot younger than me. Also, the next one I'll discuss with you is the Rocking On, which is the same as Samyang. I think they're the same lenses. The 50mm, this is a really good buy actually. The 50mm 1.4 lens for Sony is $479.95. It's a saving of $200. And I just looked now, so hopefully that stays up there for a while. But if you were thinking about getting that 50mm 1.4, you can get that for $479. So it's a bit of a bargain at the moment if you wanted to purchase that lens. I haven't used it, so I can't say how that is, but I do hear really good reports about how that lens works from a number of people. I think it's the Samyang though, but I think they're the same lens. And the last thing I wanted to bring up was this, before we go into question time. This was a lens that these lenses have just been announced by Sigma. Have you seen this lens?
No.
I'll wait till you see this, Ben, because you'll be able to get it for Nikon and Canon. But I'm just going to play it because it should play if I go to this other page, because I just want to show you the size of this lens. I'll just have to talk about it because you'll see, and it's in his hand. I mean, it's it's massive. So you're dealing there with a 105mm 1.4 lens, and this is why that lens is so big. I mean, it really is incredible. But from the results that I've seen online, it's stunning. And what I've seen, Ben, it's gorgeous. The bokeh on this lens is beautiful. The out of focus lens on this is amazing. You do have to justify whether you purchase this, though, if you have the 85, because remember, it's not that much different in focal length, but it certainly will give you a different look than if you're having, say, the 85, due to you shooting that 1.4, and it is a longer focal length, and the glass is just stunning on this lens. I don't know how much it's going to be yet. They're not mentioning that. But it's something that I probably would like to have a look at, and definitely perhaps hire or something and try and review it. I probably would like the 135 before I got this, but having said that, I'd like to see how it looks first before I made that sort of decision. That may be a lens, even though I hate carrying around heavy lenses, it might be a lens that I would just grab out occasionally to just get some sort of wow shot. But I'll wait until it's released and then I can actually have a look. The other thing later on down the track, he actually starts to show you the 70mm macro lens, and that is definitely one that I may be interested in because I love that focal length. That would be a really good focal length for weddings, particularly, that I wouldn't have to get too far back from wedding rings and stuff like that. So that's another one that I may think about having a look at a little bit later on as well. But yeah, let me know what you think about that. I mean, I did laugh when I sort of saw the size of that lens. I thought, wow, what a beast that thing is. It's certainly interesting to look at the size of it, you know, which I thought was pretty funny. So, guys, that's the last of those little bits and pieces. So let's go to questions, because I want to bring all of these up and we'll have a discussion and see what people are saying. So I'm going to go back. Like I said, if you have any questions that you have, just put at David Osler, and then it'll make sure that I can see it. If you have anything for Ben, Ben's here too, so you could put at Ben or something.
Not in the chat, I'll get in there.
Now, let's say, Gerald says, we love the live chats and ability to discuss. And that's the thing with these live chats. Yes, I am going over a lot of what's on Sony Alpha Rumours, but we now come into a chat where we can discuss things together, expand it. A lot of people that go in to read these things don't really understand what's there, or they would like to take it a little bit further, or also ask other people what they think of things. And that's why I laughed when that guy said that. I mean, clearly, if you're not interested in me going through these, well, you don't have to watch. And, you know, but it's typical the way that you get these trolls that just come in and start to whinge about anything. Paul said, David, any advice regarding adapters for Canon glass? Metabones is expensive. I'm wondering if it's worth the extra price. Definitely not ready to give up completely on Canon. Yeah, I'll be using the MC11, Paul. Definitely if you're using Canon, that's by far the best way to go. If you've got Nikon, it's another issue because it's not as easy. But Canon, definitely. That's why more Canon shooters will switch than what Nikon shooters probably will, because it's much harder to get good autofocus on the Sony cameras. The Panda Photographer said, yes, the Angry Photographer does YouTube to stay afloat. Oh, I love it. Mick said, Paul, you can go way cheap adapter, but not with autofocus. Yeah, that's the problem. If you want autofocus, you have to get the MC11. Dihar Jono said, was your a7iii in full frame mode or APS-C? Thinking APS-C uses less of the crop center, thus less overheating. Yes, it was using the full frame sensor, so you may be correct. It may have worked better if I used the Super 35. I didn't think about that, but yeah. Anu said, what is the boot up time for the a7 III and overall responses? Well, I'll tell you. I'll turn it on. Oh, well, that was quick.
Instant.
I was laughing. It was instant. I mean, I'll probably turn it on again now, and it's probably not right because I've just turned it on. But basically, we just laughed, Ben and myself, because it was instant. Like less than a second. It's, yeah, basically instant. And it's very responsive. I've found the touchscreen probably is the nicest one I've used. I think the touchscreen works really well on this camera. Overall responsiveness is fantastic. Some reviews have raised concerns about longer boot up time. Well, I certainly wouldn't say that. Well, what's my A9? Let me try this and see. I'll turn it on. We'll just see. So on. Well, the A9 was longer. Yeah, the A9 was probably a bit longer, actually. Yeah, yeah. So the A9 was longer than what the a7 III was. The a7 III, that's ridiculous, actually. Yeah, I did it. It's instant. It's basically logging on instant. So that lets you know that one. Oh, Kane's on here. G'day, Kane. That's my son-in-law. He's just about to go on a trip to Bali, and he's saying his flight's been delayed. Hopefully you'll be flying off shortly, Kane. Have a great holiday, mate, anyway, if you're still waiting. The Panda Photographer said, I said in the morning live a week ago about Sony making a 200 to 600. I must have missed that when you said that. Mike said, yes, the Metabones is worth the price. It works perfectly with all my L glass. While others don't. Yeah, and that's why really you do have to pay more to get something that's going to work every single time. What else? Gerald Williams said, Jason Lanier, latest YouTube video using Canon glass with MC adapter on Sony. Save your money and get better, cheaper MC11, and I have it and love it. The only thing is, from what I've seen, it's fantastic for stills, but I still believe that the video side of them suffer. I think the only way you're going to get really good video autofocus is if you're using more native glass. That means the Sony, the Samyang, you know, the Sigma, those sort of lenses that are built in without the adapter. Because the results I've seen with the MC11 definitely struggle a little bit. They hunt a little bit with the adapter put on. Peter said, hello, jerks, with the a7iii. Not very nice, Peter. Mike said, I start up my a7iii is faster than my a7 II or my a6500. Well, like I said, I did it here with Ben, and he goes, wow, it was instant. There was no delay at all. It might be longer if you put that first battery in, because when you put the battery in the first time and start up, it does do some system things that takes a bit longer for that first up. But boy, turning it on after that, it was instant, ready to go. Keith said iPhone will shut down in that temperature and the sun and not on. Yeah, well, it didn't. I mean, Keith, like I said to you guys, I'm never going to lie to you. I'm always going to tell the truth. The iPhone didn't shut down. The a7iii was pretty bad. That shut down in 14 minutes. But the A9 and the a7iii shut down both at the same time, about 26 minutes. But I filmed it with the GH5 and that didn't shut down. And there you go. I could have easily probably done 3 hours with the GH5 and it wouldn't shut down. So that's why I said in that video, if you did need to do that, you need to be shooting something like the GH5 if you want to shoot 4K and do something like that will go an hour long in extreme heat. It's not a problem for me because I don't shoot that way. I'll be doing that in 1080p. I wouldn't be shooting an hour of 4K. But definitely if you wanted to do 4K, the Sony cameras like they are now are not for you if you're dealing with extreme heat. You can't do it if you're shooting for an hour. I'm certainly not going to lie to you, but like I said, it doesn't matter to the way I shoot. Casper said, I think I'm going back to A-mount. What else would be it? Peter said, I would prefer the 21 over the 24. Yeah, none of those focal lengths really interest me. Do you have a wide-angle lens?
12 to 24.
Oh, so yeah, so you've got the 12 to 24. Would you be interested in a wide prime?
For real estate, maybe?
Yeah, what would you go for?
14 or 16, probably.
Yeah, so see, Ben's got the 12 to 24 wide angle. Remember, I've got the 16 to 35, and I also have the 10 to 18, which I can use on full frame as well, and that gives me 12 to 16, and I'm quite happy doing that. I wouldn't mind a wide prime, though, that was fast in case if I needed to do something really low light. Yeah, so I'd have a think about that one day of getting a really wide prime for things like receptions and stuff like that. Mick said, what part of the coast are you going to tomorrow? I think I'm going to drive down to Apollo Bay and stuff, I think, and have a look at some waterfalls and stuff. I think that's what I'm going to do tomorrow, I think. Panda said, I bet Sigma is going to make a 200mm f2.8. They probably will, Keith. It wouldn't surprise me at all. What else have we got? The Panda photographer said, I had so high hopes for the x-H1, but yeah, it's basically the noise is still the same. If you want low light stuff, you can't really go past the full frame cameras. Mick said, where is Ben hiding Susie? Where did you put Susie?
Oh,
He dumped Susie. I think he dumped Susie. I can't believe it.
She's in my bedroom.
He said she's in her bedroom. He said she's in his bedroom. Oh, I love it. Peter said, say what you will about Angry, but he made a good point this morning about larger sensor like medium format takes longer for the shutter slit to move down. The sensor which will blur with more handshake. Look, like I said, I did used to use full frame, medium format. They are still the ultimate if you want to get that resolution and the gorgeous look that they do give, because you've got a larger sensor. The issue is that they are very slow, so they can only be used very methodically, and you wouldn't take it out and do something where you were shooting very fast, like weddings, even portrait shoots outside where you're trying to move very quickly, because they're just not quick enough for that type of thing. So they have their place, but having said that, that is probably changing as more and more cameras come out. You know, like the next Sony that comes out, probably the A9S or A9R or whatever, will be 70 megapixel. The new Nikon that comes out will no doubt be around about that as well. Canon is already up near the 50 megapixel now. So the advantages of having those medium format cameras are disappearing, and I'm not sure, it's certainly not something that I would want to go towards. There are advantages, like the flash shutter sync speed is much better than what you can with your normal digital SLRs or SLRs. So there are advantages to it for sure. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. David said, hello from the Lake of Ozarks. I'm not sure where that is. I would love a 200mm f2. That would be incredible. What else? Gerald says, Peter, can the angry photographer blocks any real detractors? Anu said, I'm badly waiting for someone to test some adapted long telephoto lenses with the MC adapter lenses. Yeah, that would be interesting for someone to do that. I still think you need to be using native lenses really, though, for doing a lot of that sort of stuff. Gerald said, I have the Sigma 100 to 600 f5.6 to 6.3 and use it with the MC11 adapter, and it worked better with the MC11 than the Metabones. Yep. Casper said, David, A7 III compared to the A9. I'll let you know in that. The thing is, when I go and review it, I'll do a review probably over the weekend with it, and I'll post that, but that's going to be a review basically just of the A7 III, because I think it needs to be reviewed in its own. And then I'll do a review after that talking about how it compares to the A9. So I will do that for you, but they'll be done as two different reviews, I think. Rick saying hi from Brooklyn. Hi, Rick. Richard is saying, I would like to see 35mm from Tamron or Sony. Yep, that'd be cool. What else have we got? Peter Kent said the Camera Store TV did a recent comparison and found that the Sigma lenses work much better on the MC11 than the Metabones. Yeah, and I think that's definitely the case. I'm not sure, Rick, whether that rocking on was autofocus. Does it say? Let me come back. Doesn't say, I don't think. Let me just see, I'll just log on to here and we'll have a look. I'm just trying to see if it says if this lens is autofocus or not, that rocking on. Does it say anywhere? The lens autofocus, Merc. Yeah, it's autofocus. Yes, it is. Yeah. So it is an autofocus lens. Very cheap for that price. It says down the bottom, actually, that the integrated autofocus works in conjunction with camera focus systems for quick, accurate, and precise AF. Yeah, so it is. Yep. So it definitely is a autofocus lens. Were you laughing at someone saying something? Oh. Lost audio, is it back again? Yeah, Mike said yes, it has autofocus. What else have we got? Gerald said, Ben Ashford, what do you think you... So I'll put Ben's face up again and he can answer this. Ben Ashford, when do you think you will switch to Sony so you and David can share lenses working together? Oh, big one. Come over, Ben. Hang on, I'll switch you over. And he'll give you an honest answer.
As I said earlier, if I was starting out again, I'd go Sony, just because to how relevant the technology is now. For me to get to that point, I'd have to have quite a few, probably nearly double the amount of weddings I'm shooting. Like, I'd be lucky to be doing 8 to 12 a year, roughly. I've only been shooting weddings for 2 and a bit years. I think I've got probably, 18 or 20-ish under my belt. So yeah, I'd have to be working a lot more consistently to sort of justify that big jump, really. So
yep.
Yeah, that's my sort of honest opinion.
Yep.
Not tomorrow.
Yeah, it won't be tomorrow, that's for sure. And see, this is the thing that I was saying to you as well, that you've got to be very careful too. Remember, you should not try and go into debt to to buy gear, because basically, look, you love getting the gear straight away, yes, but then when that novelty is worn off and you're paying back something on your bank card or a loan, that novelty will wear off fairly quickly. And unless you've got the money to justify it, it's something you should not really do. And remember, it's like I said to you, that photography should be more an art. Does the gear help me? And yes, it does. Look, I'm as big a gear hog as anyone else, but it does help you in certain aspects. Like I showed you the thing the other day with the dancers and stuff like that. The A9 definitely helped me in that scenario. But overall, it doesn't change the way that you shoot in the art you're shooting. Have I regretted moving over? No, I haven't. But I could justify it by the amount of money I'm earning through my business. Ben is building his business up at this stage, so he's got to be very careful how much he will sell or spend, because if he hasn't got the money coming in to justify how much he's spent, it becomes then something that can be very bad, and you start to get stressed that you're not earning enough money anymore to pay the gear that you've got. And you really shouldn't do that. Really, the best way to do it is get enough work and then buy the money you're earning, then buy the gear, so that you're not going into debt to finance your gear. And see, Ben at the moment is not earning enough to do that, but it will happen. But at the moment, he's just not earning enough to do that. And you've got to be very careful, guys, about what you do that. But that's a great question. Let's have a look. Rick said about how many images do you typically deliver between a wedding? And this is where one thing, I discussed this last week with Ben, because Ben has second shot for me a number of weddings, and I told him off for how many images he was giving. And I did, didn't I? Yeah, I told him off. Look, I would probably shoot an average of 1,000 images, and that's myself and Kerry. So I'm probably shooting around about 600. Kerry will probably do around 400. And Ben has seen the way that I work, and I'm very slow in the way that I do things, and I take my time. Ben, being a new photographer, has got the typical thing when you're new, that you're that keen, you want to make sure that you get the shot, and he's going bang, 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 and giving 3,000 to 4,000 images.
I'm not giving that much, but I'm shooting.
Yeah, that's what he's shooting, yeah. And the problem is that if you do that, how many are you giving, roughly?
Sort of 500's a minimum-ish.
Yeah, so he's having to cull all those images down. And remember too that the thing is that a lot of that's experience as well. So because Ben has just started out, and he won't mind me saying this, because Ben's starting out, he's a little bit nervous and he wants to make sure he gets the shot. And so he will take probably 2 or 3, say probably 3 or 4 shots to make sure he's got that result. Yeah. Whereas often I'll only have to take the one. But like I said, that's experience.
And the EVF.
Yeah, and the EVF, he just said, is a big thing as well. Yeah. Because you'll laugh, when we did a wedding together not long ago, I was taking shots and I'm looking through the EVF. It was very bright and sunny. And I could tell immediately what my exposure was and everything else. And I could see Ben over in the corner, and I laughed because Ben was looking at his EVF, he's looking at his viewfinder on the back to see what his exposure was. And you have to do that if you're shooting Nikon or Canon, because there's no way you can look through the viewfinder. So you do have to do that chimping a little bit to make sure everything's correct. So it does slow you down, and therefore he's taking more shots than what I'd take. And that's one big advantage of, say, going to mirrorless, because you don't have to do that anymore. But Ben will slow down as he gets more and more experienced. I'm suggesting usually that I'll shoot around about just over 1,000, and I'll give about 800. I don't delete many at all, because I try and expose correct in the camera, and I try and have it cropped correct for the camera in the beginning. And like I said, it's usually the way that I'll shoot, and then I don't have to edit much. Because remember, it's the editing time later on that becomes the issue, because if you're editing, if you're doing 3,000 images, it takes you a hell of a lot longer than if you're trying to edit, 1,000 images. And that's the thing that I want to try and get past. I keep getting people from shoot.edit and all these places saying, send me your work and they'll edit it for me. I don't want to do that because it's my work. I want to be in control of whatever I do. So you do definitely need to slow down and breathe. And I said this to Ben, that breathe, take your time. The bride and groom won't know that you're working slower. And I often have them say to me, thank you, David, for not going bang, 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 bang. And then, I'll take one shot and move on. And it's something that you just get with experience. I mean, I don't know how many weddings I've done. I can't count them all. But that's the difference, is experience. And Ben will get there. Where are we? What time are we at? It is 2:22. What time do you have to go?
I'll probably shoot it the road.
All right, mate. Well, Ben's going to go. Just say bye to Ben because he's got to go. He's got to hit the road and fly his drone.
See you later, guys.
So say hi to Ben.
See you in the chat.
Catch you, mate.
Group
I'll
soon.
see you later.
Thanks, mate. Talk
See you later.
soon. See you guys.
Yeah, Rocking on. The Panda photographer said Rocking on is North American distributor for Samyang. Yeah. Gene Lewis said Sigma 70 macro is enticing since I do a lot of macro. I think it is. It's a quite enticing macro. It's one that I probably would like to look at myself. Richard said, hey Ben, almost bought the D500 when it came out, but fell in love with the A6500 because of the EVF. Yeah, you were looking at the D500, Ben, weren't you?
I was,
Yeah, Ben was looking at that at one stage and he ended up buying the D810. Which he loves. Anyway, he wanted to go full frame. Jim said, hey David, freezing my butter from Minnesota. It's a nice day here today. Catch you, Ben. Gene said, I'm very interested in the Tamron 28 to 75. DS Greg said, Minnesota has 2 seasons. Winter is coming and winter is here. Jim said, missed any discussions about the a7iii overheating. Yeah, I discussed that in the beginning, Jim, so just scroll back after this and you'll find it there. Justy said, a7iii uses more plastic than the a7R3. I think it contributes to the heat problem. And you know what? It may, because the metal would act as a heat sink, but that doesn't explain why my A9 turned off at the same time, because the A9 is a full metal body. And they turned off exactly the same time. And remember, I honestly don't think that there is a heating problem. It certainly doesn't matter for me. For that camera to go under those temperatures and last for nearly 26 minutes, I really think it's great. And like I said, I'm quite happy with that. And I did the 1080p test and it went for an hour and a half and I gave up. It wasn't overheating. So I don't think it's never going to be an issue if you're shooting 1080p. Well, it wasn't for me anyway. Steve said, greetings from Adelaide. G'day, Steve. Have tried out the Tamron 70-200 GT with Metabones M4 on the A7 III. Works well. That's interesting. Thanks for letting us know that. Gerald said, will last longer shooting 4K if you're using the grips. Yeah, and it probably would. That takes the battery heat further away from the internals of the camera. And that's what I can tell you. I've shot with my a7 III. Now, that turned off yesterday in 14 minutes. I think it was nearly 15. When I normally shoot, I usually use an external battery with that. I take the battery out and shoot an external battery, and it's never overheated, even in really hot weather. And I've done some 4K tests on that before and it didn't turn off. So the battery is a problem. And I've got a feeling that the battery sensors in those possibly turn off the camera before the actual camera sensors does, because it could really be a battery related issue. And I have got the battery grip. So I think if I did that, if I put the battery grip on, it probably would make a big difference. It definitely would make a difference if you use an external battery, but at the moment you can't use that with the A9 because there's no external batteries or even third-party batteries with the a7 III. So we'll have to wait for that, but I agree, that would make a difference in the heating. But I wanted to do a basic test of as the camera is, and like I've said to you before, Gerald, I'm always honest with you guys. If I find something that is not right or truthful, I'll say it. I wouldn't care if it hurts Sony because I would tell you the truth. I don't think the overheating yesterday was an issue. I really don't think that was a problem at all. If it is an issue, don't buy the camera. Buy something like a GH5. But it certainly was not an issue for me. I'm quite comfortable with how that works for my 4K shooting. The Panda photographer said Susie's being mistreated. I love it. Mortifier said, hello, I'm going to order the a7 III soon. Please use my link down below. I have got one that'll be down below. I'd love you to support me and buy gear through there. At least I get a little kickback. That's the only money I make out of this. Oh, and monetizing the page, I should say, through YouTube. What's he saying? I'm ordering that soon, and I can afford either the 16 to 35 2.8 GM or the 16 to 35 f4 plus the 55 1.8. Okay, I can tell you exactly which one I get: 16 to 35 f4 and the 55. That is definitely what I get if that's all you could afford easily. Then you've got that beautiful 55. The 35 is not the best. I mean, it's a nice walk around street type lens, but it's not the best focal length for portraits. There's another option you could think about there is the 85 Sony as well. You could also put that in and replace the 85. I probably would get the 85 before I got the 55 if they were the only lens you could buy, modify, but yeah, that would be your choice. Carl saying hello from Toronto. How are we going for time anyway? Nearly an hour. David said, oh, that's just talking about lakes. Dreamer said, sorry I'm late. So what's the verdict, David? Did it overheat? And how did the test go? Well, yes, it did overheat at 26 minutes. I don't think that's a problem though, Dreamer. But yes, it did overheat and shut down. Rick said, I joined late. Don't know if you covered this question. Are you going to give up the A6500? No. Because I'll be using the A6500 on the gimbal. It's still the best camera that you can use on a gimbal. And plus it's got the Play Memory apps. That's important for me for some things. So I won't be selling that camera. No, I'll be keeping it. I'll probably even keep that if an A6700 comes out. I'll probably keep it and then just get the A6700 if that's released. But I'll definitely be keeping it for the gimbal use. And it's also such a fantastic camera for travel. Yeah, so no, I won't be getting rid of it, Rick. Mortifier said, was thinking of adding the 28-2 as well. Looks really nice, yes, and I've heard nothing but good reports about that. There's a number there. Says, is there some possibility that the A7S III will be announced at NAB? Well, it's always possible, but I don't think it's going to be announced at NAB. I think it's going to be announced at Photokina. There's been nothing even mentioned with rumours or anything really on that camera at this stage. So I don't think it's going to come out, but you never know. They may just drop it, but I don't think so. Remember too that NAB is just when the A7 III is released in the US. So I don't think that they want to take the limelight off that. So I'd be very surprised if that's announced. The Panda photographer said, David, no, you're not a gear whore. If you're using the gear for your work, unlike the amateur photographer who just buys it and doesn't use it. Well, yeah, I do use everything that I've got. That's why I've sold the GH5 now, because I'm now going to shoot total Sony. I did love using it, and I am going to miss the 4K 60p. But at this stage, I'm just going to have to be shooting, 1080p 60 if I need to shoot that slow motion. I do have to justify, even though I'm running a business, I do have to justify how much I buy. And I just couldn't justify buying the A7 III and still keeping the GH5. What probably will happen is when the A7S III is announced, I probably will get that. And I probably would get an A6 700 if that gives me something like a fold-out screen and 4K 60 or whatever. I probably would get that camera too. So yes, everything I have I use. So that is one difference. So I do use it. Otherwise, I wouldn't buy it. What else have we got? David said, waiting for my A7 III to ship in April. We'll be getting the 24-105. That's a great lens, f4, and the 28 f2. Beautiful. I don't know. I'm a bit curious. I suppose you just want the wide angle. I'd probably go for... Oh, no, you've got 105 there. Yeah. Yep, that's probably a nice range if you do shoot wide open. You want that wide aperture. Gerald said, waiting for my A7 III also. I already have the 24-105 and the 28 f2, and they're both great lenses. Yep, I know Gerald really raves about that 28 f2. Hi, David from India. Just curious question. How does Sony's eye autofocus work in wildlife in detecting the eyes of birds? I don't think Sony eye autofocus works. I think it's specific to humans. I believe that's the case. I'm not really into shooting wildlife I shouldn't say shooting. I'm not into photographing wildlife at all. I very rarely do it, so I can't answer that. Someone else in the chat may be able to answer it. I can't, so I can't tell you how that goes for that. I'll let you know how the eye autofocus works on the A7 III when I take it out over the weekend, so I'll let you know. Oh, thank you so much, Rick. Really appreciate that, mate. He said he loves my work too. I think it's Abby, if I'm not quite certain. Thank you so much for saying that. Dreamer said, "I autofocus algorithm is only for humans now." Yeah, I thought that. I didn't think it even works with dogs. I think it has to be humans. Everyone's saying thanks to Ben. Yeah, Ben's great. Said, I remember seeing other videos on YouTube that said IAF uses contrast detection. Yeah, it is. It does use contrast. I believe, well, it may use a bit of both, I think, but I know it uses contrast more. That's why I'm curious to try the IAF on the a7 III as against the a9, because the a7 III has way more contrast detection points than the a9 does. So it's going to be interesting to see if the IAF works better. And who said, thanks for showing the boot up time. What are your thoughts on the EVF? Well, let me check, because I haven't looked at that, you know. I'll tell you live. Because I'm just curious to know. Bear with me. I'm going to look outside because I'm curious to just look out the back, and I'll tell you exactly how the EVFs look. You can watch me as I do it. So that was the A9. Okay. The A9's way better. Yeah. Yeah, so I looked out the back, and I've got plants out the back and everything. The A9 basically kills the look of the a7 III. Is it bad though? No, it's not, because it's basically the same. It's probably a little bit better than what my a7 III was, and I never worried about that. The only time you'll ever notice, guys, is if you're shooting between both different cameras, all right? If you're changing like that, if you've got the A9 and then you shoot immediately to the a7 III, you're going to notice a difference, which I just did then. There's brick at the back of my house, and I could see the brick was sort of almost aliasing a little bit compared to what the A9 was, and that's resolution that's doing that. So the a7 III is definitely better than what the A9 is definitely better than what the a7 III is. Would it worry me? No, not at all, because if you're looking through it, it's still fantastic. It's just not as good as what the A9 is. But like I said, I'm not going to be continuously pulling each camera up. On its own, it's fine, but yet it's definitely not as good as the A9. No way. Which is the same as the a7R3. I think the a7R3 and the A9 have the same EVF. So that's answers that question. So the EVF is definitely not as good as what the A9 is. Fast-moving subjects, I'm not sure. Probably won't be as good. Let me just pan and just see. Yeah. Yeah, it's not as good as what the A9 is, and I can even see some rolling shutter. Like I can see the rolling shutter through the EVF straight away there with the a7 III. Let me just try the A9. Yeah, the a7 III is not as good as what the A9 is, but having said that, you can't expect it to be. Remember, you're dealing with a camera that's 2,000 US against 4,000 US. There's no way they can make that look the same as what the A9 is. Remember, Sony have said that this is their introduction camera, and for what it's offering, it is incredible value. Really, you shouldn't be comparing the EVF and things like that, or the rolling shutter, with an A9. They're not comparable in that respect. They're two totally different machines. What else have we got? DS Greg said the Canon fanboys will hate if the battery grip improves the overheating situation. Yeah, and they probably would, but like I said, I don't think the overheating's an issue at all, to be honest. It's the most overrated thing that's out there. 26 minutes, you shouldn't be complaining. Dreamer said, I remember a few guys arguing the a7 III is better for video, not for stills. I disagreed. In my humble opinion, the a7 III is still a primary for photo, is still a great photo camera with added video features. Yes. Well, I don't know. It's probably the best hybrid camera that's available, to be honest. I think from what I've seen, it's stunning in its video, and if you look at those DxO marks, remember we looked at that in a previous video that I put up. Let me just see if I can find that for you, because I'll just go over it quickly with you, because I'd like to just discuss that with you. Because I'll go through that with you and just show you the DxO marks, which were actually outstanding. So let me just see if I can find the discussion on that. Where are we? Because it's basically is exactly the same as the a7R III. It's stunning for what it actually is. Just trying to find where it was. Oh, here we go. If you look at the scores, basically when you're looking here, and it's saying here the Sony a7 III scores 96 points at DxO mark, very close to the a7R III. If you look at it, the landscape dynamic range, which really is the only thing that I ever worry about, to be honest, and I suppose the low light, the a7 III is 14.7, the a7R III, we'll look at it here because there's a direct comparison. The overall score was 96, the a7R III was 100, colour depth was 25 bits, 26, landscape dynamic range was 14.7, 14.7, low light was 3730, 3523, so the low light is better on the a7 III than it is on the a7R III. So basically both cameras are almost exactly the same if you're talking about quality of those cameras. So don't believe that the photographic side of this camera is not outstanding. It is, especially for the money that you're dealing with that camera is giving you. And also it's got outstanding video. Look at Max Ura's review of it, and it's outstanding in video. In a lot of cases it's better than the a7 II, which for the price that they're asking for that is nuts. Yeah, so I think it's probably the best all-around camera that's available if you wanted to shoot video and stills. James said, is Nikon DF still good for weddings? Yes, and any Nikon camera is good for weddings. Would I buy that camera though? No. But it's a lovely camera if you like, you know, to be the controls like what Fuji has and stuff like that. But like I said, I'd probably now prefer shooting that type of thing. Sony, James. Ben's gone. It would have been interesting to get his opinion about that. But I know he's just recently bought the D810 because he was shooting the crop sensor cameras before that, the D720, I think. 700 and 7200, I think it was. Steve said, does the overheating test differ if you use extra battery grip? It should. It should last longer, Stephen. I think it would. But I don't want to be carrying around the battery grip all the time. Gerald said it definitely would be better if you used external batteries, and that's proven in all of the Sony cameras. Peter Kent said the 28f2 is a real compact, sharp focusing gem. Yeah, and it is. I know Gerald loves that lens. Oh, there you go. Gerald's Mike said IAF on my A7 works with a dog. Oh, well, there you go. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for saying that, because I've never tried it. Well, that's really interesting. It said it also works with the a7R III with cats. Oh, okay, there you go. Peter Kent said, has anyone tested the autofocus and low light with an f4 lens on the a7 III? I had trouble with the a6300. The problem is, Peter, that the Sony cameras focusing is dependent on the aperture. You need fast aperture under low light. And that's why I think whenever they give their aperture ratings of -3 or whatever it is, they're I think doing it at an f2 lens or a 1.8 lens. Whenever I'm dealing with low light, that's why I use the 50-1.8. You have to shoot with fast glass. The f4 will not work well in low light. That's why you need fast primes. What else have we got? I'm just looking for the ones that say at David Osa because we're running out of time. Peter said, you look like you're having so much fun with those cameras. Gerald said, yes, the EVF is similar to the EVF on the a7R2. Yeah, I noticed that. It may be a fraction better, but the A9 is definitely, it's way better. The EVF is way better on the A9 than it is on the a7 III. You're paying $2,000, guys. You can't expect to have similar features in that. Am I worried about it? No. Doesn't worry me one little bit. Isn't the EVF rate adjustable? Yes, it is, and I haven't adjusted that yet, you know. Let me check that because that's one good point. I'll just go through the menu because I probably haven't set that. I might not have it on high. Bear with me when I just check and I'll just see where it is. Yeah, display quality was standard. All right, I'm going to test it again. It was standard. Actually, it's better. It is better. Thanks for that, because I forgot about that setting. Like I said... Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thanks for that, Jim. I completely forgot about that. Remember, I actually said I've only just tested this. I picked it out yesterday, set it on the 4K settings to do that heat test. I haven't set any menus on this camera yet. That's improved it, but it's still not as good as the A9. Remember, there's a million, I think, different pixels. It's got a million less pixels. There has to be a difference, and you can see it. It just looks a bit more coarser when you look through it. I'm not worried about it, though. It's still totally usable, but it's just not as good as the A9. What else have we got? Have I ever met or worked with Matt Granger? No, Matt Granger was from Sydney. Australia is a big country, massive country. He lived in Sydney. I'm from Melbourne. We're an hour and a half flight away from each other. So, you know, Melbourne's a long way from Sydney. So, no, I've never met him or worked with him. Mike said, Jim Penn not an A7. Oh, that's something else. What else have we got? Mike said, I prefer fast primes too, but the focus in low light with slow f4 lenses with the a7 III is amazing. That's because of all those CADAF points. Yeah, and I might try that, Mike, because you know what? It might surprise me because the CADAF is the thing that it uses in low light. So I might find that it actually is a lot better than it used to be. The thing is, though, remember, f4, if you're in low light, you're always going to have to raise the ISO up to quite high. That's why I'd always probably prefer to go for primes. I always want to work at the lowest ISO I can. Even though these cameras can go to ridiculous ISOs, I still always prefer to work as low as I possibly can. So I'd still prefer to use a fast prime than an f4 lens. But you might be right, Mike, because I haven't used this yet with all those CADAF points on it. Barry said, does work on birds. Well, there you go. I mean, like I said, I don't really do it. So Tony said, are the 55 1.8 and the 35 2.8 still current, or would you choose other lenses? No, I love both of those lenses. That is one of my favorite walk around street lenses. The 35 2.8 is dead sharp. It's 2.8, and look at the size of it on this thing. I love traveling with that, and it's one I would always get. The Samyang is out now. That's also very good as well. And it's cheaper than what you'd have to pay for this one. So I love it, and I think the Samyang's the same size as this one. So perhaps I'd look at that if I was buying a new lens now. But I do love the way that this works on my camera, and I would definitely not get rid of it. The 55 is Sony's fastest focusing lens, I believe, and it's definitely the fastest lens that I've ever tested in low light. Incredibly sharp. I love it, and it's one I would never get rid of, and I'd buy it again today. Jim said, was the a7iii EVF you adjusted? Yes, it was. Yeah, the A9 has already been adjusted. The A9 is still clearly better, Jim. It's clearly better than what the a7iii EVF is giving you. Not going to lie to you guys, just going to tell the truth. What else? Ray said, hi, David. How was the anniversary? Lovely. Yeah, we had a great date, Kerry and myself. We went to a beautiful restaurant in Melbourne. It was really great. I just adore Kerry. She's just amazing. And you know what? I'm so lucky to have a photographer as a wife. She's actually amazing in what she does. A lot of times she just blows my mind in what she can do with photography because she has an amazing eye to see art. And it's great to have that aspect of it. And I'm so lucky being a wedding photographer that I always have a female with me. Because she can do things obviously with brides and stuff like that I can't do. And that's one thing I can suggest with you all. If you are dealing with becoming into wedding photography, try and align yourself with a female second shooter at least, because it is much better to have that female assistant. And she's always sort of fussing over the bride. They love her for that aspect of it. She can go in when the brides get changed, and you've got to be careful with how you obviously interact with females nowadays, and I never have to worry about that because Kerry can always do that side of it. And like I said, she's a brilliant photographer, so I was very lucky. What else? Rui says, does your car know how to get the camera store on its... to get to the camera store on its own? I know. I think their eyes glow every time I walk in through the camera store. Because they know, oh, money, ka-ching, the second I walk in. I had to laugh when I went in to buy the camera. And they always sort of run over to me. They know that I'm going to buy. David said, with the a7iii faster processing, better focusing and better ergonomics, were better improvements over the EVF. With the a7iii faster processing, better focusing and better ergonomics, were better improvements over the EVF for the 2000 Pros. I'm not sure what you're saying there, David, but the EVF to me seems to be about the same as what I'm getting on my a7R2. It looks a little bit about the same. It might be a fraction more contrasty, but they basically look the same. And I never, ever, don't get too obsessed with the EVF side of this, guys, because I've never, ever looked into my a7R3 and a7R2 and said, oh, I don't like the EVF, ever. Unless you are shooting like I just did, where you're shooting and it's one after the other, it would be an issue. But even when I'm shooting, I'll have my A9 on one belt and I have my a7R3 on the other belt, and then I am shooting between cameras, but I'm not going like this, changing between both of them. And I don't really notice a difference, so trust me, you will not notice it. Where you would notice is if you are trying to manually focus with a manual lens, because the A9 is unbelievable in how sharp it is when you zoom in. That's one area where you will definitely notice a difference. If you're not doing that, it's not going to make the slightest bit of difference. And to be honest, the advantage with using Sony cameras for me is to not use manual focusing lenses, to use the autofocus. So don't worry about the EVF. It's fantastic, especially for that price that you're paying. If it was bad, I'd tell you. It's not a bad lens at all. What else have we got? Interesting that the 85 1.8 is faster than the... It is, Rick. It's definitely the fastest focusing lens that I've ever used. What about the durability and quality to digital SLRs? Will it last 5 years? Well, in theory, my A9 definitely should, because nothing is being used on the A9. With the electronic shutter on the A9 particularly, there's no shutter being used, so there's no shutter count. So really, they should last probably forever. I've had my a7 II now for probably 3 years. I can't remember how long I've had it. I've had it a long time, and it's had a battering, and it's not looked back. Will it last 5 years? I don't know, Vinoff, because I haven't had one that long, so I don't know. But I can tell you that the durability seems to be really good on Sony cameras, the newest ones. I'm really happy with how they work. I've dropped them a few times and they've still worked. A couple of things, the mount on the top, the flash mount is the weak point. It's definitely not as good as what I was shooting with Nikon, and again, I just tell people the truth. But the overall feel of these cameras now is outstanding. Is it a D4S that I had? No, because that thing was a brick. But I'm paying $2,000 for the a7 III. That camera is incredible, and all the Sony cameras I've never felt when I've held them, when I've been using them extensively, and I treat my gear rough. I do not treat my gear like a baby. I don't put lens caps on. I throw them into the bag. I do treat my gear rough because for me as a business, it's to use it. And I've never had anything that's failed me in that respect. So I think the durability is very good. Very good indeed, and I wouldn't worry about that. Will it last 5 years? I don't know, but I won't have it for 5 years anyway. I'm always updating my gear after 2 years, so I can't answer that. Kenneth said, can the a7 III dedicate a button for APS-C mode? I don't know yet because I've got to go through the menus. I can't tell you that yet. Yes, but it doesn't toggle just up the menu point. Okay, so it obviously does work then. David said, I mean that I would choose the first 3 improvements over the EVF. Oh, okay, exactly, yes. And I agree with you. Gerald said, yes, you can set a button to go into crop mode. Okay, thanks for that, Gerald. Jim said, a great question for 5 years from now on as a comparison is apples to apples. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we just haven't had the cameras for that long yet, so no one knows. And Dreamer has said he bought his NEX 7 years ago and still taking pictures, yeah. Mike said you can assign virtually any button now on the a7 III. John said, did you change the setting in the menu for overheating? Yes, I did. I put it on the high setting, so that was on the high setting when it overheated. Yep, so I did set it on that. Keith said, oh, thanks, yep. Gerald said, David, please mention again your recommendation to get screen protectors. Yes, definitely. I bought screen protectors, so I immediately put the screen protector on. It's the glass one, and the thing is, if you don't put screen protectors on, there is a known fault. Just let me change this for a second. There is a known fault with some of the screens at the back. Also, like, I've just been checking, like, the focus. I don't know whether you can see this, but it's very fast using the touch screen. Like, it's actually really fast. I think it's actually quicker than my A9. And one of the annoying things about the A9, and to be honest, using these cameras, I actually like to use the touch to focus, and I really do like, and I use that more than a joystick. I don't use the joystick much at all. I love being able to just move the focus around with my finger, and this works with the EVF. The A9 doesn't. I don't think the updates worked with that, but the A9, you can't do it, and it annoys the crap out of me because you can't move that focus point with when you put your head up to the EVF. No, it drives me nuts. So I don't know why they haven't allowed that with the A9. The touchscreen only works on the back with the A9. On this one and the a7R III and the a6500, you can use it with the eyepiece. I wish they'd do that. But yes, you must put that screen on because some of these screens get damaged. And it wasn't that the screen was damaged, it's the covering that they put over. There is if you go on YouTube, you'll be able to see how they can remove that cover and replace it with a new one. Buy a screen protector, and these are the glass ones. Pay a little bit more and get a glass one and put that on immediately. I do that straight away whenever I get a new camera. Thanks for that, Gerald. Hi-Fi Energy Research said, what lighting would you recommend for doing weddings? What kind of kit did you have when you started doing weddings? Well, I only used when I first started using weddings, I was shooting Nikon, and I just had the Nikon flashes. I can't remember the version number. It was their higher end ones, though. But I would just be buying on-camera flash and then shooting it off-camera. Buy some sort of system that lets you do that. So if you were buying Sonys, or you could just get any brand flash. Look, really, they're all the same. A flash is a flash at the end of the day. It's all light. So I'd be buying one of the cheaper systems out there, as long as it shoots reliably, and I'd just be using that type of system to start off with. I certainly wouldn't be going out and buying big strobes and stuff like that. Just get your normal strobes and work that way first. And there's millions out there. I'm not going to recommend one over the other because I've only used the Sony flashes myself personally on the Sony system, and the Profoto are really the only two flash systems that I've used. So I'm not going to recommend them to you because they're too expensive. I would definitely be getting one of the other systems that are out there. Someone in the chat may just chime in quickly and say what they recommend for someone that's just starting out. What else have we got? Jim said my 55 1.8 is faster focus than my 85. Yeah, it definitely will be, definitely. Peter said, be aware that the a7iii in APS-C mode is 10.6 megapixels. Yes, it's not enough, really, for shooting stills, really. Kenneth Rose said banding, there will be, Kenneth. Do not really, look, the thing I can say to you is, do not, someone contacted me the other day and they had banding in their image from the a7iii. The a7iii is not designed to be shooting in silent shooting, guys. And this is the one thing I can say to you. It is not an A9. You are going to get banding if you use the a7iii in silent shooting. You're going to get rolling shutter if you use the a7iii in electronic shutter as well. It's not the same sensor as what the A9 is. There's no way I would do a portrait shoot or a wedding shoot, a page shoot particularly, with the a7iii on electronic shutter. You have to use mechanical because you will get banding. I can guarantee it, you will get banding. It's not the only camera out there that will not get banding is the A9, and that is a game changer for that. You're paying for that sensor to do that. They're totally different things. The processing is so much faster on that camera. It's a stacked sensor. You are not going to get that with the a7iii. So you all need to get over the fact of shooting in silent shutter, I believe, with this camera. It's not worth it, particularly indoors. If you're shooting outdoors, fine, go for it, as long as no one's moving. If someone moves, you are going to get rolling shutter. So if you're doing something outside and nothing's moving, the person's not moving or whatever, you could clearly shoot with electronic shutter. You just have to be aware that if something moves, you will get rolling shutter. But you definitely, I would not be using the Sony a7iii with electronic shutter under lighting. No way. So you need to put that all out of your head straight away, guys. If you're buying that camera, do not be using it under electronic shutter with lighting. Where else are we? We'll log off in a minute, guys. And the person that showed me that the other day it was really bad banding. It was really bad, actually. Yeah, so just don't do it. Don't use it with electronic shutter for indoors. Rick said, I got the 90 macro and it hunts. Yeah, that it's definitely that's a problem with that lens. I believe it's better on the newer cameras, but it's still not going to be anywhere near as fast as the other lenses. Godox, yes, there you go. Godox is fantastic for flashes. Way cheaper than what you'll get for Sony flashes and things like that. They're way overpriced compared to that Godox system. There are advantages, though, to the Sony flashes, guys. Don't forget that. I'm going to grab it. Do you want to wait for me? And I'm just going to grab it. Talk amongst yourself for a second. Don't forget that these flashes, they're the only flash on the marketplace. If you're going like this, you can do that. All right, if I'm shooting up like that, I can bring it back up again. They're the only flash on the market that will actually do that. So it's fantastic when you're actually moving the camera around. So it's the only flash that will enable you to do that. The other thing as well is you've got this great light here that you can use to turn on if you want to. It's a great light that you've got there if you want to light up your subject. You know, I mean, it's really quite powerful. And you can control that by dialing in at the back. See, I can control the intensity by dialing in at the back. I mean, that is a game changer if you're trying to get focus in a dark alley. Something like that, you know, it's brilliant. They're the only flashes that I know that will let you do that. But you're paying for these. These are really expensive. So if you don't want to pay for something like that and have that feature, which I do love, by the way, go for something like Godox. Yes, definitely. I mean, it's way cheaper. But like I said to you before, I tend to just go for Sony stuff because I can justify it with my business. But it's if you can't do that. But it is a great flash. If you were saying Godox, you can't go wrong. Yep, that's true for price. It's fantastic. Rick said, Jim said, thanks for the excellent consult. That's fine, thank you. Rick said, how does the pre-order delivery work? So delivery is on the 10th. Am I going to get the camera on, say, well, I don't know, Rick, how that'll work actually. Someone else may be able to answer that. You may get it a day later or something. Keith said, dual card slot. Can I use one for proxy and the other for original file size? Not sure, Keith. I don't do that. It may be possible. All I'm doing is saving RAW on one card and then the JPEGs goes onto a second card. You can set them up so it will do video on both or backup video. I'm not sure until I look at what that camera can do. You may be able to do proxy. I'm not sure. Does the a7iii drop the bit depth to 12? No, it doesn't apparently. It stays the same. Jim said, I have two Nissan DI700s with Air Commander, work great. Yeah, they're a good flash too. Does the Sony overheat? Never. It's never overheated to me once. There was a firmware upgrade to fix that, and my flashes came with that firmware when I bought them. I've never had them overheat, no, and I'm firing off in 40-degree days, and they've never overheated. Having said that, though, I don't fire off continuously. Remember, I work a bit slower and more methodically. That's about it, I think. Last couple of questions and then I'm going to head out, guys. Gerald said you can get 2 Godox flash points, TTL-R2 speed lights for 1 Sony flash. Yeah, that's the thing with lithium batteries. And you're right, Gerald. You've got to justify what you're getting on the Godox as compared to the Sony flashes. But I do love those Sony flashes. Would I buy them again? I'm not sure. I may get Godox if that was replaced. But I do love those features that I showed you. They really do help me with my shooting. Yes, and that's the HVL flash that they're saying there is great. I mean, they are great flashes. And the new ones that have just come out, I think they have the same system, but they have inbuilt receivers and transmitters, I think. So that'll be great as well. So there are some options out there. Mike said the bit depth drops to 12. I thought it didn't on the a7iii. I thought I read somewhere that it stayed the same, Mike. Are you sure about that? I thought on the a7iii it said it stayed the same. I thought there was no penalty. I could be wrong. Snapclick said, got here a bit late, so you may have already answered this, but what have you found comparing the a7iii with the a9? I haven't yet because I haven't shot with it, Snapclick. I'm going to take it away tomorrow and just shoot with the a7iii. I will do a review after that about how they both compare. The a9 compares to the a7iii. I'll do a review first with the a7iii to talk about it on its own, and then I'll do one comparing it to the other cameras. Are you going to pick up the Profoto A1 when it's released for Sony? I may, yeah, I may. I haven't decided 100% yet, but I may, because I do love the Profoto stuff. All right, guys, well, that's it for now. Please give me a thumbs up if you can. I'd love you to do that for me. That's pretty important because it does get me out there. So please give me a thumbs up if you can. Any questions you've got, leave them down below. Like I said, I'm going to test the camera tomorrow extensively, so I'll let you know more about how things work tomorrow when I take it out. and I'll put a review up to let you know how that went over the coming days, and then I will compare it to, say, the A9 and things like that over the coming days as well. So stay tuned for all of that, and until then, I'll see you all for the next holidays. Have a great Easter, everyone. Don't eat too many Easter eggs. And I'll see you all again soon, guys. Bye for now.